My name is Olivia Monroe. I'm 21 years old, and the day I got into Belford University, my parents bought my brother a car. It had a red bow, mine came with silence. They said I didn't need help, so they gave everything to the one who did. But what they didn't know was that while they cheered for his potential, I was building something that would outlive all of theirs. If you've ever been told to be the strong one just so they could ignore you louder, stick around. This story is for you. I was still holding the letter, the paper thick and creamy in my hand, the embossed crest of Belford University a small, sharp promise under my thumb, when the SUV pulled into our driveway. It was midnight blue, the kind of deep, polished color that seemed to drink the afternoon sun. Across its hood was a red bow so cartoonishly large it looked like a wound. The timing wasn't just ironic, it felt surgical, a precise and painful incision into what should have been my moment of quiet triumph. Ryan, my mother's voice, high and bright with an excitement reserved only for him, sliced through the screen door. Come out and see what we got you. My younger brother, Ryan, didn't need to be asked twice. He burst out of the house, barefoot and beaming, his grin so wide it seemed to eclipse the sun. He was the golden child, not because he was brilliant or particularly kind, but because he was perpetually in need of propping up, and propping him up gave my parents a sense of purpose I never could. I remained in the hallway, a ghost in my own home, the acceptance letter trembling in my hand. No one looked my way. My father, Edward, clapped Ryan on the back, the sound a dull thud of approval. You earned it, kiddo, varsity track, perfect attendance, and you've been so helpful around the house lately. I had a 4.3 GPA. I had 3 Advanced Placement Scholar Awards. I had just been offered a near-full scholarship to one of the most competitive science programs on the East Coast. I did the dishes every night without being asked. I vacuumed the downstairs every Saturday. I had once picked Ryan up from a friend's house an hour away in a thunderstorm when my parents forgot he'd gone. But yes, he was the helpful one. Later, at dinner, the silence around my achievement was a physical presence. I placed the Belford envelope on the table, next to the salt shaker. My mother, Margaret, glanced at it between meticulous bites of her salad. Oh, that's nice, dear, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an invitation to share. It was a closing statement. She offered me that thin, placid smile she reserved for topics she wished to bury, a polite tombstone for my good news. The next morning, the house was already buzzing with preparations for Ryan's surprise party. Balloons in his school colors bobbed against the ceiling. Cupcakes with blue frosting were arranged on a platter. A small speaker played the kind of hollow, upbeat pop music he loved. His friends tromped through the living room, their sneakers leaving faint smudges on the rug my mother usually protected like a sacred text. When I walked in, back from my weekend shift at the town library, no one noticed. There were no balloons for me, no cupcakes. There was only a folded card on the kitchen counter and signed, with the pre-printed words, "We're proud." I stared at it for a long time. It looked like something you'd get in a multipack from the pharmacy, generic and impersonal. A bitter laugh almost escaped me, but I swallowed it down. It would have been too loud for a house this quiet. On Friday, my grandmother Helen came to visit. She moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had learned to be careful with her own fragility. Her coat was buttoned slightly askew, and her hands held a faint, constant tremor, but her eyes were as sharp and clear as they had ever been. She didn't say a word when she entered, just walked straight to me and kissed my cheek, only my cheek, before taking her usual seat in the armchair by the window. We sat together for nearly an hour in a comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon light shift across the backyard, where Ryan's new car gleamed like a monument to their priorities. Finally, she reached into her large, worn purse and pulled out a green, leather-bound notebook. It was unadorned, the kind of thing meant for thoughts, not for show. On top of it, she placed a plain white envelope, thick with its contents. I looked at her, a question in my eyes. "Open it when you're alone," she said, her voice a soft, papery whisper. "And write something tonight." Her tone was gentle, but the instruction was not a suggestion. It was a directive. That evening, long after the dishwasher had sighed its final, clunking cycle and the house had settled into its usual rhythm of ignoring me, I sat on the edge of my bed. I opened the envelope. Inside were neat stacks of $100 bills. I counted them twice. $25,000. My breath caught in my throat. There was no note, no card, no explanation. Just the money and the notebook. Its pages were thick, unlined, and smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. I didn't cry. The capacity for tears felt like a luxury I had lost somewhere along the way. Instead, I opened the green notebook to its first blank page. I uncapped my pen, and with a steady hand I wrote, "They'll never see me coming." They said I was strong, so they gave everything to the one who wasn't. At Belaford, I was invisible, and for the first time in my life, I was grateful for it. No one knew me as Ryan's responsible older sister. No one had any expectations of me at all. I was just a face in the back of a lecture hall, a quiet presence in the library stacks. My roommate, Lena, a girl whose life was a whirlwind of designer bags and weekend trips to the city, had long since given up trying to include me in her social life. She would return to our dorm room late at night, flushed with laughter and life, to find me hunched over a desk lamp, the pale light illuminating a fortress of textbooks and paper receipts. My routine was a brutalist piece of architecture, all hard lines and no ornamentation. Up at 6, a shift shelving books at the campus library by 7. 3 lectures back-to-back, a banana for lunch as I walked across the quad, then the dinner rush at Maro's Bistro downtown, where I learned to balance heavy trays and smile through the ache in my feet. Meanwhile, Ryan's gap year unfolded in a vibrant tapestry on social media: sangria in Spain, neon lights in Tokyo, scuba diving off the coast of Thailand. His captions were always the same: living the dream or earned it. I stopped looking after he posted a video from a yacht in Dubai. The disconnect was too vast, too painful to witness. Lena was not unkind, she was just from a different world. But she noticed things. She noticed I never ordered takeout, that I wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation, that my laughter, on the rare occasions it appeared, sounded rusty. One Tuesday night, I stumbled into our room, exhausted past the point of thought, and dropped my bag with a heavy thud. I didn't even bother to turn off the overhead light before collapsing onto my desk, my cheek pressed against the cool wood. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, a cool water bottle was being pressed into my hand. "You're going to burn out, Olivia," Lena said, her voice soft. She was crouched beside my chair. There was no judgment in her tone, only a sort of gentle, baffled concern. "Why are you doing all this alone?" I blinked at her, the words lodged in my throat. Finally, I managed a whisper. "Because no one else will." Lena nodded slowly, as if that were an answer she could understand, even if she couldn't relate to it. She didn't press. She just got up, turned off the harsh overhead light, and walked back to her side of the room. The quiet gesture of kindness felt more profound than any conversation we'd ever had. On Thursday, we had our midterm biology presentation. I had poured every spare moment into it, building a detailed visual model of cellular repair mechanisms, a topic most first-year students avoided. While my peers fumbled with note cards and stammered through their slides, I walked to the front of the room and spoke from memory. My voice was low, but it didn't waver. The diagrams I projected were sharp, the logic clear. The classroom, usually a low hum of shuffling papers and whispered comments, fell silent. Our professor, Dr. Eris Rowe, a formidable woman with a reputation for intellectual austerity, watched me without expression, her pen occasionally making a small, precise note in her book. When I returned to my seat, Natalie Hayes, a girl whose family name adorned the university's new art wing, leaned over. "Look at you, Olivia," she whispered, her voice laced with a casual cruelty. "Trying so hard to impress a professor who won't even remember your name next semester. You applying for the hardship scholarship again this year?" I didn't answer. Not because I was ashamed, but because her words were irrelevant. I had submitted the application that morning. After class, as students filed out, their chatter filling the hallway, I stayed behind to pack my bag, mentally bracing for my evening shift at the bistro. Dr. Rowe stopped at my desk. "Your presentation demonstrated a command of logic 3 levels above your peers," she said, her voice even and direct. It was not a compliment, it was a statement of fact. "Have you ever considered joining a research lab?" I looked up stunned. I was so used to being overlooked that direct recognition felt foreign, almost startling. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She simply handed me a small, plain business card. "My lab. Room 4B. Come see me this Friday." The door clicked shut behind her. I looked down at the card, then at my own hands. They were red and chapped from the hot water and harsh soap at the restaurant. For a moment, I saw the stark contrast between the life I was living and the one she was offering. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room. "I have." The day I first stepped into Dr. Rowe's lab, the air humming with the quiet industry of centrifuges and cooling fans, an email from my parents appeared in my inbox. There was no call, no personal message. The subject line was stark: Grandma's funeral Saturday. The body of the email was just 4 lines, containing the location and time. There were no condolences, no words of comfort, no acknowledgement of the fact that Helen had been more of a mother to me than Margaret ever was. I read the email once, standing over a rack of petri dishes, the sterile scent of the lab filling my lungs. My gloved hands were steady. Then I pressed delete. My grandmother was gone. The woman who had given me the means to build this new life was gone. I didn't feel the glass vial slip from my fingers until it shattered on the pristine linoleum floor, the sound sharp and violent in the cathedral-like silence of the lab. A few of the other student researchers looked up, their expressions annoyed rather than concerned, before turning back to their work. Dr. Rowe, hunched over a stack of research notes at her desk, her red pen moving with surgical precision, didn't look up at all. Her lab was a place for work, not for grief. That day, the clinical quiet felt like a mercy. I cleaned up the broken glass and stayed until well after midnight. The funeral was in my hometown of Weston. I took a bus, wearing a simple black dress I'd found at a thrift store and a coat Lena had insisted I borrow. The sky was a low, oppressive gray, the color of wet gravel. I stood at the edge of the burial plot, a solitary figure. My parents were 20 feet away, their arms linked with Ryan's, forming a tight, impenetrable unit. They were whispering with an aunt I barely recognized. No one looked my way. No one waved me over. During the priest's eulogy, his words were lost to the wind and the buzzing in my ears, a sound louder than grief. It was the echo of a lifetime of being invisible. I stared at the freshly turned earth, at the simple headstone, Helen Carter. 1942 to 2022, beloved mother, grandmother. There was no mention of the stories she told, the secret smiles she saved only for me, or the $25,000 she had pressed into my hands with trembling fingers. Just cold marble and silence. After the service, I walked away. No one called out my name. The next morning, I was in the lab before the sun came up. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't stop for lunch. I worked. The project had, until now, been a theoretical side project of Dr. Rowe's, a long shot she let her undergrads tinker with. It was an idea for a nanosensor, a tiny device that could, in theory, detect the volatile organic compounds that were biomarkers for early-stage pancreatic cancer, long before any tumor would be visible on a traditional scan. It was a ghost of an idea, but now it was mine. It was all I had left. I coded simulations until my vision blurred. I cross-referenced protein chains until the letters swam together. I forgot to eat. I forgot that time was passing. That night, I didn't go back to my dorm. I curled up on the small, worn couch in the lab's break room, the rhythmic hum of the machinery a strange, mechanical lullaby. I dreamt of Helen's voice, telling me a story I couldn't quite remember. When I woke, a starchy white lab coat had been draped over my shoulders. It wasn't mine. It smelled faintly of chalk dust and eucalyptus, Dr. Rowe's signature scent. A note lay on the bench beside me, written on a torn piece of notepad paper. The handwriting was tight and neat. Breakthroughs are built in silence. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying felt like a concession. Instead, I reached into my backpack and pulled out the green leather notebook. I turned to a fresh page, the paper cool and smooth under my hand. I wrote 4 words. They will watch me rise. And for the first time since my grandmother's death, I felt a flicker not of hope, but of cold, hard certainty. By the time my mother sent a text asking if I was still enjoying school, my research had saved its first life. Ryan had posted a photo from a music festival in Belgium that morning, a blurry shot of a cheering crowd captioned, "Best semester ever." My phone buzzed with a notification from our family group chat. It was a picture of a new puppy they had adopted. No one asked what I was doing, where I was, or if I was okay. They never did. It was fine. I had stopped needing them to. The research wing at Belaford had become my entire world. The sterile scent of ethanol and the faint, metallic tang of solder were the smells of home. The glass walls of the labs were covered in a shifting tapestry of whiteboard ink, half-erased formulas, frantic diagrams, scribbled questions. My name was on none of them. Not yet. Dr. Rowe walked past my workstation, her footsteps silent on the polished floor. She paused, glancing at the data scrolling across my monitor. "Enzyme spikes are consistent with the control group," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I nodded, not taking my eyes off the screen. "It's the 4th test. The pattern is holding." She said nothing else, just placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, a rare, fleeting gesture of solidarity, and moved on. The nanosensor was finally stable. It was a small, elegant piece of technology that could be embedded in a disposable mouthpiece. A patient would simply breathe into it for 60 seconds, and the sensor would detect the faintest traces of the volatile biomarkers we had isolated. It had taken 2 years of dead ends, of calibration failures, of living on cheap coffee and the stubborn fuel of my grief. But now, it worked. We were granted permission for a limited, preliminary test on a patient who had been flagged by traditional scans. He was an older man with a family history of the disease. His tests were inconclusive, but his doctors were concerned. My sensor, my quiet little ghost of an idea, picked up the biomarker spike with 94.3% specificity. A week later, a follow-up, more invasive procedure confirmed the diagnosis: stage 1 pancreatic carcinoma. It had been caught in time. There was no celebration in the lab. There was only a profound, respectful silence. Dr. Whitaker, the head of the department who had once called my proposed metrics overly ambitious, read my report 3 times, then looked at me over the top of his glasses and said, simply, "Proceed, Ms. Monroe." A week later, a venture capital firm specializing in biotech, Mednova Labs, requested a formal proposal. Dr. Rowe handed me the initial paperwork, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "You've earned this, Olivia. They want to fund the next phase of clinical trials." I read every line of the contract. Then I pointed to a specific clause. "I want all publications and press releases to list the lead researcher as anonymous until after my graduation." Dr. Rowe raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Because I want the work to speak for itself first," I said. "Not the person." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. It was a nod of understanding, of respect. The deal was signed. Days later, a feature appeared in a niche medical journal, Advanced Diagnostics. The headline read, "Breakthrough at Belaford Lab, breath-based early cancer detection shows unprecedented promise in preliminary trials." The article praised the elegant chemistry, the innovative engineering, and the quiet revolution it represented. It credited the work to an anonymous senior researcher in Dr. Rowe's lab. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan in the family chat. He'd screenshotted the article. "Did you guys see this? Some genius at Belaford just got a huge investment. Mom, you thought it might be me, lol." My father replied with a thumbs-up emoji. My mother added, "So many smart kids these days." I typed a reply, then erased it. I typed another. "Interesting story." I hit send. That night, I walked to the dean's office and quietly submitted my application to be the honorary student speaker at commencement. I didn't tell anyone. The only person I wanted to tell wasn't there to hear it. So I didn't speak. I just kept working. 2 weeks before graduation, Dr. Rowe came into the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee from the good cafe off campus. She set one on my desk. "Are you ready for commencement, Ms. Monroe?" she asked, a knowing look in her eye. She had taken to calling me Ms. Monroe ever since the Mednova deal. I smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached my eyes. "Yes, Dr. Rowe," I said. "I think I am." They came for Ryan's graduation ceremony, which was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Mine was at 10:30 in the morning. The Belaford Stadium was already half full when I walked backstage, the early air crisp and full of a nervous, celebratory energy. Green and white banners fluttered from the light posts. In the VIP section, I could see the empty seats reserved for our family, name cards neatly printed, Mr. Edward Monroe, M.Res., Margaret Monroe, M.R., Ryan Monroe. They weren't for me. A student volunteer fumbled with clipping a microphone to my lapel. Someone else adjusted the collar of my blazer. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the parents holding cameras and flowers, and took a single, deep breath. This was not about revenge. It was about arrival. Ryan had posted a countdown on his Instagram story that morning, graduation day. T-4 hours. Can't wait to celebrate with the fam. My parents had both reposted it with heart emojis and champagne bottle gifts. None of them had bothered to look at the commencement program for the morning ceremony. No one had told them who the keynote speaker was. I had made sure of it. On the Jumbotron screens flanking the stage, the university crest appeared. The dean of students walked to the podium, his voice echoing through the stadium's sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce this year's honorary student speaker. Her work has already changed the landscape of medical diagnostics and will undoubtedly save countless lives. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of the newly formed Polnet Diagnostics, Ms. Olivia Monroe." A ripple of confusion, then recognition, then applause spread through the crowd. I saw Lena jump to her feet in the third row, cheering wildly. I saw Dr. Rowe, standing near the faculty section, cross her arms and give a single, sharp nod of approval. And then I saw them. Row 5, center left. My father, Edward, froze mid-clap, his hand suspended in the air. My mother, Margaret, blinked, her polite smile faltering as she looked from the stage to the program in her lap and back again. And Ryan. Ryan just stared, his mouth slightly agape, a look of pure, uncomprehending shock on his face. I walked to the podium. The applause was a wave, immediate and overwhelming. I waited for it to subside. I was once told that I didn't need help. I began, my voice steady and clear, carrying across the vast stadium. I was the strong one. So I learned to build things in silence. The crowd was rapt. I didn't tell them a sob story. I told them a story about work. I told them about the science behind PulseNet, about the quiet elegance of the nanosensor, about the patient whose life had been saved because we caught a monster while it was still small enough to fight. I told them about late nights in the lab, about second jobs, about a green leather notebook that now sat in a temperature-controlled case in my apartment. I didn't thank my parents. I didn't need to. I thanked Dr. Eris Rowe for seeing potential where others saw only silence. I thanked my roommate Lena for her quiet kindness. And I thanked Helen Carter Monroe, my grandmother, who once handed me a blank check and a notebook and told me, use this to build your escape, and don't look back. I ended with a message not for my family, but for everyone else. To anyone here who has ever been overlooked, who has been told to be the strong one so that your struggles could be ignored, they may not clap for you now. But one day, if you build your own stage, they will have no choice but to stand and watch. I looked toward the family section. Ryan was leaning toward my father, whispering frantically. Did you know about this? My father didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. The cameras caught my eyes on the Jumbotron, and for a single, fleeting moment, I held his gaze. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a gesture of triumph. It was not a gesture of bitterness. It was simply a gesture of truth. This is who I am. Now you know. The stadium erupted in applause as I stepped back from the podium. Later, in the small, crowded press area, a local news blogger was already typing out a headline on their laptop. Biotech CEO stuns at Belaford commencement. Family watches in shock. I didn't check my phone until that evening. There were 43 unread messages. The first one was from my mother. We had no idea. We wanted to meet for dinner. I met my team instead. The message came in at 9:17 the morning after graduation. Margaret Monroe, we'd love to have you for dinner tonight. Just us, no pressure. I stared at the screen, letting the words hang in the quiet air of my new, empty apartment. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just an invitation back into the silence. I didn't feel the old, familiar ache of anger. I felt nothing, a calm, quiet distance. I typed back a simple reply. Olivia Monroe, I already have plans. And I did. The second floor of Trattoria Valini, a warm, bustling Italian restaurant downtown, had been reserved under my name. The space was filled with the low hum of happy conversation and the clinking of glasses. The scent of garlic and fresh basil felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. This was my team. My real family. Lena raised a breadstick like a conductor's baton. A toast, she declared. Everyone raise your glasses to Olivia, Dr. Rowe said, her eyes twinkling over the rim of her wine glass. The quietest hurricane this university has ever seen. I smiled. It was a small smile, but for the first time, it felt completely my own. The evening unfolded with an easy, unforced warmth. We shared stories from the lab, inside jokes, and a truly terrible rendition of Happy Birthday for one of the junior researchers. My phone buzzed on the table. A new message. Ryan Monroe, you deserved more. I'm sorry. I was blind to it. I read the text twice. He had seen. Finally, he had seen. I typed back, my fingers moving slowly. Olivia Monroe, some people are just mirrors. We only see ourselves in them when we're finally ready to look. I hit send. Another email notification popped up. It was from Dr. Whitaker. The subject line read simply, your work. The message was brief. I rarely admit this, but I was wrong about you. You are the future of this field. Thank you for staying when it would have been easier to walk away. I let the screen go dark and walked to the restaurant's large window, looking out at the city lights flickering to life against the darkening sky. Each tiny light was a story, a struggle, a quiet ambition. I stood there for a long moment, just watching the city breathe. Behind me, I could hear Lena laughing. I nodded slightly, not to her, but to a memory. She would be proud, I whispered, and I knew it was true. They had once left my grandmother's name off every celebration. Now, the world knew her granddaughter's name before they did. I didn't need to punish them. I simply chose not to let them hurt me again. Justice didn't arrive with a thunderclap of revenge. It came in the quiet hum of a centrifuge, in the steady hand of a mentor, and in a voice that, when it finally chose to speak, echoed louder than a lifetime of their silence. Like the final, resonant chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but its power is in how deeply it is heard. Some betrayals don't end with revenge, they end with the quiet, unshakable act of becoming undeniable. Some stories aren't told for applause, they are told so that someone, somewhere, knows they are not alone. If this story echoed something you've lived through, let it reach someone who is still writing theirs.